do you think? Why do you think that funding is so hard to come by for this research?
Your guess is as good as mine. So, yeah. Yes.
You mentioned in your presentation various references to ICNIRP. Who are ICNIRP? And we're told in Gibraltar that everything's within ICNIRP levels, and therefore we don't need to worry about the outputs from the mobile formats.
Yeah. Also a very important question. I have personally, other scientists have done that too, trying to get down to the core of what is actually ICNIRP. It's a post office box in, is it Munich? I don't quite, Munich, yes. But the trade sort of ends there, you know. And they claim to be the official body for, etc., etc., etc. But I have to give to them, at the meeting at the Royal Society in London 2008, their head, Paolo Vecchia, professor in Italy, stood up and said, and it's on tape, I often quote him word by word, that these guidelines were never meant to be used in medicine or biology. It has nothing to do with living matter. They cannot be used as defense walls for industry and so on. He was very clear about that. And actually, I think he was a little bit sad, because he said to me privately that he had to take a lot of criticism and shit from agitated citizens. And he felt it wasn't fair, because they had never meant it to be that. But governments, parliaments, health authorities didn't understand the difference between technical recommendation and biologically based ones. And as you see, we have tried to educate all these health officers and politicians and so on, and they don't seem to listen very much. And so, yeah, that's the answer. Yeah, the man here.
Thank you for your talk. I think mobile telephony is here to stay. It's not going anywhere fast anyway, by the looks of it.
Could I stop you and say that's dependent on if mankind stays? So we heard, you know, like the global warming, and seriously, I collaborate a lot with the professor at Harvard, who's an expert on this. And the future, if we read the climate report from the UN, like the Stockholm meeting, they are pretty grim, to say the least. In the worst case scenarios, most of mankind will be wiped out, actually. We are not talking about moving a few blocks of housing and so on. That would be major catastrophes of a biblical proportion. So, sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Because, you know, you never see dogs calling phones, and you never see giraffes with machine guns. So this is human-based activities which could be questioned. So I'm not so sure when you say it's going to stay.
It will go with us.
It's up to the consumers. Yeah. The moment you say no, it will not stay.
My question is more, my understanding is that our local telecom company is blasting us with 3 or 4 powerful transmitters for us to get a signal for our Gibraltar. Is there any mileage, or is there any truth in the fact that smaller, less powerful repeaters and transmitters would be more beneficial, if you want to call it that, for the society?
The general levels will rise, but your own handheld device will downgrade its output power. And since you have that closest to your body, the radiation will be decreased. But you know, we're talking about taking off a few floors from a building that is 1 million floors high. What's the meat? What's the beef? It doesn't mean any real difference, you know. So don't be fooled by that. I very often see, for instance, that campaigners or activists, they complain about the local mast installation, and in some instances the telecom companies or the operator says, oh fine, we will move it away. And so they do, the people are happy, they move it away and upgrade the output power so the functional levels are exactly the same. Which from a credibility point of view puts a question mark on the campaigner.
In my simplistic way of seeing it, it's something blasting out a more powerful weight from up the other rock, for example, is kind of, to me anyway, more damaging. Is it not?
No, you know, in biology you very quickly reach something called saturation. And, you know, like I can only kill you once, not twice. You need a saturation very quickly. And that's very common in damages too. You reach a plateau and from it there is no further increase. You can increase the exposure, but you are damaged or dead or ill or sick or whatever, and it won't change. So no, I cannot say that will happen. And sort of generally it looks fine, but I would lie if I said it will make it safer. There are no proofs for that at all. Again, coming back, that's the safe level. 0.001 microwatts per square meter. And that's the natural background. Yes, the lady over there.
Olle, thank you for your presentation. It's just as good a second time around. And thank you also for organising for Olle to come. My question is basically if we can't, as members of the public, you can't look towards organisations, institutions, insurance companies to act responsibly in this matter, I think it falls back to us as individuals to act responsibly. We've been talking a lot about, you've been talking about toys. In this instance, we have a choice over whether we use these toys or not. At the moment, there's some concern about the rollout or the deployment of smart meters, where we don't appear to have so much choice in the exposure that we're having. The words like mandatory are being used by governments and by energy supply companies.
Could I stop you there?
Yeah.
Since I understand that formally, legally, you are still a part of the UK, right? And in the UK, in England, for instance, it has been, how do you say, revealed that you do have a choice. You do not have to accept the smart meter at all, which would be very odd if you had to, you know. And also, as you know, the whole debate around various gadgets like smart meters, they seem to be very hollow. I listened yesterday on the BBC, and there was a big, or is a big debate in the UK about this, because it's going to cost, was it 11 billion pounds? And the consumer thought it was better to give the consumers the 11 billion pounds and reduce their costs. And as I said before, I called the 5 major energy suppliers in Sweden. 3 of them didn't even understand my question, because I asked them, now when you have introduced these smart meters, when will I see it on my energy bill? When will it get cheaper? 3 didn't understand the question at all. They had no idea what I was talking about. The number 4 sort of giggled nervously and said, oh, I wish I could say, but I don't know. And the fish say, are you crazy? The electricity prices will only go up, they will never go down, it will get more and more expensive. And I said, Jesus, but they're selling these gadgets telling us how much better and cheaper everything will be. And he said, no, it will never be cheaper. So you are fooled. You have to realize that, you know. And I do understand that energy consumption needs to be lowered. And the easiest way to do that is just to lower it. Not to introduce a lot of surveillance equipment. And you know, in Sweden there was recently, you say poll in the news, and they were asked how many that actively used the information from the smart meters, and it was less than 0.2%. People don't have interest, knowledge, or time to go to the basement, you know, oh wow, oh, Karen, we have to do something about this, you know.
Sorry, just because,
No, please keep
my
on.
question really for you was, if we're to take responsibility for ourselves, do you have a recommendation beyond sort of saying no as a consumer? Are there steps that you see that we can take that can be effective and fast in a situation where
there are 2 ways.
falling for so long?
There are of course 2 ways. One which I do not recommend or support, and that was the one I showed. You buy some kind of a metal saw, chains, and just pull these gadgets down, you know. That's one way to react to it. The other way is to just say no, as you say, and always stick to that, and keep your credibility. And even if it seems in vain, and we talked about that this day, just think about people like Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa. They said no. And it didn't mean very much, maybe, always, but it did make a difference. And I think that's the way to do it. And it's not your responsibility to come up with an alternative techniques or methods or whatever. It's up to the big mama and big papa, which is the parliaments and governments, because the industry actually, they are not really to be blamed, because the industry has gone to governments and parliaments and said, is it all right if we whole body eradicate the whole population 24/7 wherever they are? And the parliaments and governments said, yeah, that's actually what we want. So the people in power here and in responsibility, and therefore they have a much higher salary than you, they are the members of the parliament and the members of the European Parliament and so Congresses, Senates, whatever. And they should be put against the wall. And the simplest way to do that is to be very clear. That's the only advice I can really give.
Being part of Europe, then, you know, we have to sort of follow European regulations and legislation.
No. You shouldn't go down that avenue if you're serious about saying no. Because then you say no, but on the other hand, and then you have lost. Then you are entangled.
I think the point that Jenny was trying to make is that we are in the European Union, even though we're not an independent member country. We are in the European Union by virtue of Britain's membership in the Union. Being in that position means that whenever the European Union provides a directive, it has to be transposed into Gibraltar, and within the margin of the directive we transpose into our own legislation. It doesn't necessarily follow that we have to replicate the way Britain, has a common standing, but we can do it in our own way.
And you, as a professional politician, you need to adhere to these decisions, but she, as a consumer, doesn't, because we are still democracies.
And this is why I wanted to add my second question, which was, I was trying to write as much as I possibly could, particularly for the case of the Council of Europe and the Wealth Organization. Is there any particular way for the information there to be passed to Janet and I can then...
Well, we made a
Of course.
recording of this.
Sorry?
We're making a recording of this presentation.
But also you need the actual papers, and that could be something, of
And
course.
I see the second body you come from Sweden, it's a cold country, but do we have to have air conditioning so cold?
I agree, it's very cold here,
It's on or off, this place, it's on or off.
We have some more questions. The lady down there, please.
I wanted to continue with the smart meters, please, because as a local, I'm very concerned that it's on its way here, and already ministers are saying, oh, it's a government consensus. And unfortunately, we didn't cover it enough, and I'm sure that the public is not aware of what smart meters do. As you say, it's sold for one purpose, called costing or factor, whatever. But it's all the side effects that we don't hear about. Can you expand on the side effects, please? So maybe those that might not have heard of smart meters.
Well, of course, there are a number of issues, or as you say, side effects that can be discussed. And now we talk about wireless communicators, smart meters. They will work basically as a mobile phone, but constantly sending, transmitting information. And depending on time, the utility companies, the technique they've chosen, they will irradiate you in different ways with different pulsations, modulations, and blah, 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 all of that, So they will be different. And also, of course, they will be a kind of surveillance tool, because if someone wants to know when you put on your television set, they will see it as an increase in the energy consumption. So that has been a debate. They are hackable. So there's already a huge problem in countries where, especially teenagers, and in my, line of genomic descent. I have some relatives that are professional super hackers, and they say that it's so easy to cut into these smart meters and, for instance, borrow electricity from you, which you have to pay, but they use it, and stuff like this, you know. And in the United States and Canada, they have proven to be not fire safe. They catch fire quite often, and they are now taking back hundreds of thousands of these smart meters to adjust them, and blah, 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 all of this, you know. And as you say, many things are sold to the general population. I have another such example, which are low energy light bulbs, which, yeah, I mean, they were said to really cut down on the electricity bill in Sweden. And I mean, my bill is going like a rocket, so it has no impact. And also they are sold to us, and that you can find on the YouTube a number of video clips where scientists or amateur scientists have tested. It says it will last more than 10,000 hours, and they don't. They break much earlier. And then I called the, what you say, in the United States, I think it's called WITCH, the consumer organization. In Sweden, we have an extremely good such. And the woman there said, oh no, the lamp we have tested that lasted the longest, it was a single lamp that went on 8,000 hours, but the others in that batch were between 2,000 up to 4,000. So again, you are just screwed, do you say that? So, and they are very expensive, and I mean, it's just the favorite. Yeah. And all these metals, and in Sweden, these low energy light bulbs of the previous sort of first type are to be handled as risk debris, you know.
What about LEDs?
I don't know very much about them, but they are supposed to be better. But as a Swede, I don't like either one of them, because all of them gets a very, what you say, wide lines, and that's dependent on today's Nobel Prize actually, because it produces a white light, and we want to have a yellow light, which is more natural to us.
So then you're saying the smart meter is not more dangerous or influential than a phone?
Not more. I have not seen any such comparisons. It's a little bit like comparing a pistol with a revolver.
You have, at least with a mobile phone, you have a choice and you won't give it to a baby.
But you do have a choice with a smart meter too. Just try to say no.
As a country, you wonder you do, you know?
Yeah.
Enough of us.
Yes, please, the man.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. I work for education, and actually specifically work for a special school. I've worked for over 12 years. I've seen an increase in the number of syndromes happening here, specifically in Gibraltar. And when speaking to pediatricians here, they don't seem to have a clue why it spiked the way it has. Now we have talks with the parents, and the parents want a bigger school and all that. Is there any correlation between these waves and...
You know, if you give me like half a year of constant lecturing, I could cover all the other papers, and among them there is a big, huge American-Danish study where pregnant mothers were investigated and their offsprings were followed for 13 or 14 years. And to make a long story short, it turned out the more the mother had used mobile telephony as well as the child, the more the likelihood of autism and ADHD.
What concerns me
And
is
it's hard to get past such a study. It's so big, it's so detailed, it's so controlled, it's so long running, and still no one reacts. And other scientists have filled in. You know, it's like a crazy jigsaw puzzle where different pieces float around in a three-dimensional void, and they are seemingly from the beginning not interconnected, but then suddenly more pieces are added and you start to see a pattern. And in some of these areas, like impact on learning, behavior, etc., the pattern is pretty strong. And therefore, I saw just a few days ago that in Sweden, scientists had written document to the Swedish Health Board and Parliament and government, urging them to remove this exposure of children. And also you have this very famous Baby Safe project that was launched this year, I think, in March or April or something, and not allowing small children to be exposed. And you know, people even buy baby monitor, baby alarms and throw in the cost, and they take the mobile phone in the baby cot too, or the baby pram, and not thinking about what they're doing. And I do hope it will turn out to be without any risk, you know.
What is the situation in Sweden? Because you said that you have very good legislation in favor of people suffering from this
Yes. Disability, yeah.
environmental
Yeah.
condition.
Yeah.
So is it then the case that they've outlawed Wi-Fi in schools, etc., and mobile phones are not working? So what action have they taken to back up that legislation?
I have to expand a little bit on this because it's a very important issue you bring up. The reason the United Nations decided to turn their standard rules into a convention, which by the way is the highest legal level on this planet, there isn't anything above a convention from the UN, was because they discovered that certain countries, and I hate to admit this, Sweden was among them, we were talking a lot, but not doing very much. And therefore they said it's not good to have these standard rules because they were just advisory. And you didn't have to adhere to them if you didn't want to. But when it's a convention, the UN could file a complaint, official complaint, and fine the country. And for a country like Sweden, it would be in the order of many 100 million Swedish crowns. A huge sum of money that Sweden would have to pay if we violate these handicap rules and regulations. And therefore, the convention was formed, but still, it's a pretty rotten place. It is so much more that can be done. And you have to remember that, as I said, Sweden is very rich. We have the economic means to do this. It's different, like in West Africa. They have some other issues to attend to. They don't have very much money. So maybe you cannot ask for wheelchair ramps everywhere in every village. But in Sweden you can. Jesus Christ, you can do that. But there is still a long way. But in Sweden, for instance, among many things, there are people that have applied for electrosanitized cars, and they've got it. So if they ask for accessibility measures, they get it. And that's interesting. And coming back to some of our discussion, and maybe that's inherent in the system, I very often feel that if you put the right question to the right person with the right form in front of him or her, you will get what you want to. In civil services and so on, the system is very square, you know. If you hit the right button, things will fall out. And I often get letters, submissions and so on from private persons, and it's just impossible for me to understand what they actually want. There could be like 100 pages, and after the last page I'm still, you know, what the hell are they wanting? What is the thing? What do they want to have? And therefore I always recommend, skip your life story, take a piece of paper, write at most half a page, end it with one sentence, I want to have, or I don't want to have. Simple as that. Because then suddenly the person at this municipality office, he will say, wow, I have a document for that. You have your card, or you don't have Wi-Fi in that school. So be clear when you communicate. I think that's important. Sorry, the man lost.
I just want to ask a question from Olle, and it's about microwave ovens. So every morning I get my bowl of porridge, I put it in, and it goes on for less than 2 minutes.
Yes.
So I haven't got time to walk away from it, so I stand in front of it, every morning to nuke my porridge.
Yeah.
So I'm taking that's a bad thing. I'm taking that's a bad thing in the scheme
But
of
the thing
things.
is like this. Microwave ovens that you use at home, you don't use it very often. And one has calculated, because they have this wave shield, from the beginning you can actually see it. It was with small holes in it, but now it's integrated into the glassware, so it's not obstructing watching the thing spinning around, you know. And that will dampen the microwave exposure approximately 1 million times, meaning that if you step away in the order of 5 meters, then you're pretty safe from the exposure. But the big issue is McDonald's, Burger King, that kind of places, where you have industry microwaves, which are very strong. They should heat your hamburgers instantaneously, and young people stand there and with their forehead often leaning towards this microwave oven. And there the question is, what will happen with them? And in Sweden there has been a description, and no one has tried to correlate this with occupation or anything, but in young people they have a new type of forebrain damage which has not been described before. And of course, as a scientist I said in it, well, what did they work with? Where were they employed? And no one knows. No one thinks it's important. So you are probably safe. And the only thing I see, in Stockholm we have a very posh restaurant. I've never been there, it's too expensive for me. But I've heard people who have been there, and I understand they never use microwave ovens. And they have, you know, stars in this Gibraltar and so on, you know. Sorry, yeah?
Yes, I noticed that you use in most of your reports frequencies, sort of low gigahertz to sub-gigahertz ranges, which happens to be the sort of resonance of water.
2.45 gigahertz.
Is there a correlation between that and the self-damage, i.e., are there other frequencies that we could use that would be better?
Yeah.
Or less harmful?
Yeah, that's a very clever comment, you know. To begin with, that's the basis for a microwave oven. It's a 2.45 gigahertz thing, and it's because it's the string resonance of water. So it's the most effective frequency to heat. Unfortunately, as you say, one has chosen, especially for the third generation mobile telephony, frequencies that are very close to. In Sweden, 2.4, and for Bluetooth, 2.45 gigahertz actually. So they are right on this frequency for string resonance. And therefore, it could be that one could, for instance, use longer wavelengths. Maybe reopening, you know, long wave and so on, where we maybe, yeah, exactly, where we maybe are not affected. And the thing, we have talked a lot about extremely low frequency fields, for instance, studies in Denver with the power lines, and scientists at that time draw the wrong conclusion that the power lines, they will carry in the United States 60 Hertz fields, in Sweden 50 Hertz fields. With a 50 Hertz field, the wavelength is in 6,000 kilometers, and that was the culprit. But they forgot about so-called electromagnetic disturbances in the kilohertz, the megahertz, and gigahertz range. So maybe the bad thing with the power lines in Denver is not the ELF fields, but something else. And that was never really investigated. There are studies implying that maybe there is some disturbance that is actually causing these associations with a thick line as such. You know. Again, pointing to that, yeah, let's try long wave or middle wave ranges and see if that has an impact as well. And again, cookbook type science, very simple experiments, easily done, cheap, but someone has to pay for it, you know. And it doesn't seem to really happen. You are employed by, yeah, that would be great to have you.
You you want to ask a question?
If you don't mind, I'd like to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, of course.
I work for the regulator, but whatever I say is my own personal view and not the authority. And when I started working with the regulator, one of my first jobs was monitoring GSM transmissions and making sure that radio transmitters had all the safety stickers and warnings, warning people that they're going into a restricted area and they're doing it at their own risk. Most of the rooftops do have these labels, and it's part of what I used to do. At the beginning of your presentation, you were quite general in talking about electromagnetic frequencies and not specifically into any specific sort of frequency. Obviously, we don't have enough time to go into all the hazards of each one.
And also to add, I mean, differences in modulation, pulsation, and all of that. There is so much to
I think you mainly concentrate on mobile telephony.
Yeah.
Now, I'm of the opinion that I'd rather have 20 base stations than one big one blasting throughout. Because specifically because of what you mentioned about mobile phones adjusting the power to the nearest transmitter. So the closer you have the transmitter, the less you will be radiating yourself. There's been mention about the levels used across the world and different bodies and what they recommend. There has been very little change in those levels in the last 15, 20 years. We're still working to the same levels. I can tell you that that is what there is. There's nothing else to compare it against.
But it doesn't make it right, does it? The fact that it hasn't changed.
Until we're proven wrong, unfortunately, and this is the whole thing. That's why I say I would like to play devil's advocate, because until the World Health Organization comes out clearly saying, and they haven't clearly said that it will cause cancer. They've hinted on it, but they then fall back and say that 15 years of study and research are not enough to prove that it will create cancer. So until those bodies out there come out openly and admit it, or at least provide the proof or accept the proof, whatever is the correct answer here, there is very little that governments and institutions will do.
But shouldn't the industry be proving that it's
Hold on.
not harmful?
No, sorry, let me correct you there. It's a direct correlation that a country's GDP will increase with its communications and with its developments in technology. So, in a way, government wants to promote communications and wants to promote technology because your GDP will go up. You know, it's part and parcel of the new world that we're living in. Everything is based on the internet. They are getting internet into all these African countries out there, trying to bring them back and promote their economy.
But as a consumer, we should have the choice, not depend on you to make the choice.
So I'm not government.
No,
I'm just putting the other side of things because it's worth having it in a balanced sort of discussion. You know, this is what you're confronting.
I know.
This is look. I personally.
I don't even think it's business only. I think it's about life, and I mean, you talked about education and appropriate education, but I think that it's so much about empowerment in other sections too. People feel empowered. You have a problem, you immediately go and access information, and I think that is what is bypassing is this really sensible thing. But I think the psychosocial points that the professor is raising about the way that we are at the same time stopping communicating, stopping really learning about real life issues and stuff is a very serious matter that is going by the by. And as a parent, I'm very aware of that as well.
Yeah.
But I think others can talk about the technical aspects that are dragging behind the science, which is really what we've been listening tonight as well. That there is science out there, industry is ignoring it at the moment, I think.
Well, again, I think I personally, I've got young kids, and only recently, my eldest is 12, and he has just got a mobile phone. And I bought him the worst mobile phone that he'd be totally embarrassed to use because it's only meant for emergency calls, and that's it. you know, all the recommendations go up to 15 years. The child's brain is not fully developed till they're 15. You said 16. You know, so as a parent, do you want to play with that? You want to, you know, it's as an adult you might take more risks, and you're more averse to taking these risks. You know, but with your children, obviously, you want to protect them as much as possible. So,
but you know, actually, I agree with you on most points. I think they are very important to bring up, and we can have a very long and lengthy discussion about that. To begin with, the brain is not fully developed at 15 or 16. It's just hardly started to develop. The maturation of the brain is actually the day you die. Then you're at the top of your mental capacities if you have not been struck by a mental disorder like Alzheimer's or something like that, you know. So you have a continuous increase if you want to. But if you only view the world through a computer screen, like a mobile phone, then of course you level off. And I recently discovered that in the United States, for instance, there are quite big groups, especially in the black population, that actively say no to this. Quite a few people, I didn't know that, but there is a very strong movement. And they also use, of course, the internet to spread viral videos to tell parents to really think about this. And they have the same kind of messages I have. Don't trust me. Go to the sources and read for yourself and make up your mind. And don't blame anyone, especially not the telecom industry, because they are not in charge of these issues. That's the parliament, that's the government, that's the health authorities. They are just companies, nothing else. You know. They should make a profit in our Western type world, you know, and so on. And they are not in charge of health issues, and thank God they are not, because they are not professionals in that area. They're professionals in constructing mobile phones and computer games and whatever, you know.
The problem here is at the end of the day, education.
Yeah, and also I think you touched upon a very important thing, because I often get the question around cancer, and people don't like what I say. For me, the cancer issue is the least important. As you say, the World Health Organization has cancer classified, but they have shown an association between mobile phone use and certain very rare brain tumors. And the increase in incidence is very slight. So even in a sort of worst case scenario, the extra cases are very few. And in the word mobile phone use lies your life. What more did this person do 10 years before? Did he eat pate? Did he go to Sweden? Did he buy a car? What did he actually do? So no one has shown that mobile phones cause cancer. Not at all, but they have shown that already prevalent cancers are driven forward by that kind of irradiation, and that, what you say, the molecular pieces behind cancer are fulfilled after radiation damage, like DNA fragmentation, which could lead to, for instance, brain tumors. But we're still away from really proving it. But at the same time, from the consumer point of view, should they wait until they get cancer proven or not? And I leave that to you. You have to make up your own mind, you know, what type of life you want to live, and what kind of ethical and moral concepts do you use in your life. And I find it fascinating, because the only species on this planet that has an active death wish are mankind, you know. We work hard on destroying ourselves, the rest of the creation, as well as the planet. And I say again, you never see giraffes with machine guns. Never. No.
Can I add something?
Oh, please, yes.
I think the only way forward is education. At the end of the day, you say the consumers are being, in a way, enticed to get mobile phones. Mobile phones are no longer mobile phones. They are fashion accessories. They are gadgets. which everybody relies on, and the more bling it has, the more status, especially with kids, and that they will have. And that correlates to consumer satisfaction, which then correlates to votes, which correlates to government promoting these things. I attend in the UK international frequency planning groups, and I work specifically on satellite industry, and the satellite industry is struggling to keep the mobile technology at bay because they want more frequencies and they want to be able to come out with the next generation of gadgets that us as consumers are going to take on board, and we can't get enough.
It's relentless.
So the education is the only way you can stop this, because it's not the health issue, it's sort of the Christmas present of next year that we're fighting.
It's all these things.
You know, so
No, I'm extremely fascinated how this small item has changed lives and behavior, and you know, Swedes are generally thought to be dull and boring, and now they are even more so because they're only but it has a good side to at least the male population, because 20 years ago, if I went in the underground or at the bus and I saw a beautiful woman with a cleavage, I would quickly look and look away. Now I can look for days. She doesn't see it, she doesn't do that. To take close-ups, wide shots, anything. And it's fascinating, because if I would have tried that 20 years ago, it would be, what are you doing, filthy man? Today, oh, are we at nuclear war? I didn't notice that. What, Ebola? Do we have patients in Stockholm? I haven't heard that. You know. And the funny thing is, you know, you said that they seek information. Maybe they do, but I always, what you say in English, peekaboo, you know, you look down over the shoulder, it's generally only games. And it's very simple games, like simple card games and whatever. I'm not so impressed. No, I'm not. And at least in my reality, in my part of the world, most of it happens outside of phones. For instance, my wife and I, we are, and I want to stress the word amateur, we are amateur gardeners. You cannot do that with a phone, you know. It's lousy to use to dig with and so on. It's not there. The garden is here, you know. And you can never do anything with a phone as we see it. And a lot of other things. My wife is an excellent chef, and she never uses a mobile phone to stir the sauce. And so on. So I disagree, but I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But I think people tend to forget that most of life actually happens in ERL, I think you say, as computer experts, in real life. So. Yes?
Could they not, for mobile phones again, to go to say the same thing, could they not put a docking into the mobile, put the mobile onto a docking, and you can speak to it and listen to it through the loudspeaker, then you wouldn't have any contact with it?
Of course you can. I mean, you don't need a docking. You can use it as it is, you know, in speaker mode. But it doesn't change anything when it comes to radiation and so on. It's still there, you know. So it's convenient if you're doing something else. You can put it on your desk or whatever.
But you wouldn't be touching it, so you could sue the manufacturer.
Sorry, I would touch it until you enter the speaker mode. I could tell you a story. Oh, thank you so much. I could tell you a story from a meeting in Göteborg on the west coast of Sweden, 1998. The meeting was called Mobile Phones and Health. And it was several days, and the world-leading experts were there. We were listening for days to the kind of data that I presented here. And at one of the days, there was a physicist from Chalmers University in Göteborg, who is an expert on the technical side of this. And I said to him, please, could you tell us, if we use all the information we have got during the days and translate it into a distance at which we should put the phone to be safe, not to be struck by the effects we have heard about, how far away do I need to have this mobile phone? And he said to me exactly like this, well, Olle, it's hard to give you an exact figure, but based upon the results we have heard, I think it's enough if you put it 5 to 10 kilometers away. I didn't laugh, you know, I was kind of struck. And then he said, but on the other hand, you still have the base stations. So you wouldn't get down below these levels where scientists see effects. So it's really a very hard nut to crack. And then I was interviewed in the Swedish radio, and I talked about this. And the day after, a teacher in high school physics called me and said, you are such a stupid asshole, you know. You don't have to put it 5 to 10 kilometers away. It's enough with 500 meters. And I said, well, how long arms do you have?
So what
and then slammed them.
You don't need to own one, then you just need to be living on, because they're everywhere, all around us.
Yeah. And you know, and this is really your field of expertise, but when you talk with radio astronomers, they always point out that if you have a mobile phone, an old-fashioned GSM phone, and put it on the moon in standby mode, it's just waiting for a call, seen from this planet, it will be the strongest radio source in the universe.
Really?
Yeah. And that goes back to that the natural background levels are very low. And fortunately or unfortunately, we don't know that, but our own star also transmits microwaves. And therefore we have a microwave background which is slightly higher than the Big Bang microwave exposure, but still at very low levels. So, yes.
Is there any effect with having multiple phones? Like, is there a redundancy effect, or is there a dissonance effect when you have different frequencies? Like, they're not all going to be, even though they're all manufactured within a certain frequency range.
Yeah.
Depending on how they've been treated, how old they are, they're all going to have slightly different frequencies, so you have interference patterns.
No one has really investigated that. It's a very important issue as well.
Right.
And there could be synergistic effects or opposing effects. Well, the future will tell us which is sort of the best combination. If there is a good combination, I hardly believe so.
The scariest thing I saw on YouTube is they had 3 new 4G phones that they put, and they called them all in unison, and they had popcorn kernels in the middle of them. And
That's an internet scam.
Is it?
That's not true.
Okay, so I was like, wow, that was freaky.
No. And they actually interviewed the person who had done it. It was very simple, you know. And no, it was very clever.
Yeah, that's good to know, yeah.
No, and that's not true. No.
Good. But still,
the lady behind?
You know, about microwaves, I threw mine away a few years ago, but now you're saying they're safe in a way. But what about the food that's inside? Is that not being changed?
I don't say they are safe. I just say what you can calculate as a safety distance. Again, making it impossible for a mother or father to cook their porridge because they don't have hearts. They have to stand up and they will stay. And whether that is damaging or not, we don't know. I also said, you know, that professional restaurants don't use them because they actually heat the food in a very gentle way. It may sound very surprising, but they destroy the texture. In blind test, people can always tell if it's microwaved or not. And these posh restaurants, they don't want to destroy the texture of the food, and therefore they don't use it. Yeah.
No, I I don't know whether your proposition is correct, but I think there is something in it. But there are many things that are far more dangerous than these possible effects. Like, for example, vegetable oil or sugar or sunlight.
Yeah.
So should we really be worrying, very scared, because sugar scares me a lot more because everybody's pre-diabetic, the obesity crisis, etc.
Oh, yeah. No, that's it.
And cancers, melanomas.
Yeah. That's really a core comment, I would say, But you have to remember that different risks do not blend into each other. If you, for instance, lower your consumption of sugar, you cannot call more. They do not communicate from a risk point of view. You have to treat each. Yeah. So you have to decide for your sugar, what should I do? And for your mobile phone exposure, for your alcohol consumption, driving a car, living in a city, and so on.
Shoot yourself.
And then you come up with a life profile. And in Sweden, and we talked about that a little bit, some of the most important persons that interacts with society nowadays, they actually live a very old-fashioned rural life, and they're extremely well looked upon, They're very famous, and they write books and have blogs and blah, blah, blah. But they live as my grandmother and grandfather did, without all these things and whatever. And people are looking a lot towards it, maybe in a romantic fashion, but as I said, like in the black communities in the United States, they don't want their kids to be exposed because they feel it's not the right way it should be done. And so there are movements. And as you say, there are other current confrontations. And just imagine if, for instance, Ebola would get loose. You can forget about your sugar and your
I think we better stop. They're going to throw us out.
No, they cannot.
Just
we have, two questions.
I'm just interested, Ollie, would you at some point consider, a rhetorical question really, but would you at some point consider bringing into the conversation the idea of depopulation? Because would you as a scientist or as a person, would you consider bringing this in and talking more openly than we tend to do about all these different things that we're looking at, that we're considering, trying to find out what's going on behind?
Yeah, there are a lot of, I don't know the English for that, movements that discuss these items in that kind of terms. That is actually a matter of active depopulation. So no, I don't believe that at all. But at the same time, for instance, in Sweden, we have a very well-known international authority on population statistics, and he claims, and it has been proven rather wrong, I would say, that the level of population worldwide will level off around 10 billion people. But when it has been recently reinvestigated, it seems that he is maybe completely wrong, actually, because men and women are like rabbits. So it will just continue and continue and continue. And of course, the load on nature and environment is already such that you can calculate, and I'm not talking about actively killing anyone or so, but in a long-term run, the sustainable population will be in the order of 500 million people. That's 500 million. And so we are too many.
So things that kill off humanity may actually be the saving grace
for all other species, yes. And as you probably read, was it last week or the week before, the World Wildlife Foundation announced that the last 40 years, approximately half of the animal species have gone extinct. We should not be proud of that. That's horrible, And when interviewed in Sweden, one of these, statistical people, he said that with this rate the last animal species will go extinct in about 20 years. We will keep a few cows, dogs, cats, and aquarium fishes, but the rest will just be gone. And that will actively mean the end of everything, because we are so very dependent on all this. And I just saw recently, and if I should scare you beyond the sugar consumption, like honeybees, United States, to say the least, I would say, all the honeybees originate from 200 queens. That's the genomic pool in the United States. We're talking about a continent being dependent on 200 queens. There used to be 200 million queens.